let us put our hands together for our first panelist, Ms. Susan Foong, a partner at Baker Tilly. Next, we have Ms. Woo E-Sah, partner at RSM. We also have Mr. Simon Ng, Deputy President of the CFA Society Singapore. Last but not least, we also have with us Ms. Choo Ling, Chief Executive of Assisi Hospice, with us in the panel. The session will be moderated by Dr. Gerard E., Chairman of the Charity Council. Let's give our panelists and moderator a warm welcome.
Okay. In the publication that is being given to you all, there is a box story I'll be referring to. This is the story on the Irish Autism Action, IAA. It's a smallish charity, and it succeeded in supporting 17 families, but very quickly got into financial problem and had to cut back to supporting only 2 families. Now, what actually happened was the CEO explained that he didn't have a budget because he didn't believe in budgets. He says because donations are so hard to predict, it's quite impossible to budget for donations, and therefore it's quite pointless to do it. It sounds quite familiar. I've heard some charities saying that as well. And he says his excuse was he didn't want the charity to be focused on fundraising only. And the danger of doing a budget and trying to anticipate the funds that you need is they would put all the energy on fundraising and not on the work itself. So what actually then happened was they ran out of money and they cut back from supporting 17 families to only 2 families. And of course, there's an uproar. This is not totally unfamiliar among some of our SSAs, social service agencies here in Singapore. It is difficult to prepare a budget to anticipate. Meaningful, but you still must do it because the lack of a budget of knowing how much funds you need doesn't allow you to prepare for your work moving forward. The problem with doing budgets is you really need to have an understanding of the cost of the programs that you're running. So later on, you'll hear a presentation about the importance of the cost accounting, or one of the publications actually covers it. But in order to be able to cost your programs, you need to have good accounting system, good accounting records. Now, just having the accounting records itself, when it comes back to the budget, obviously then this comes to the subject matter of fund accounting. How do you set aside money in terms of funds for various purposes that you have in mind for your programs to expand or to be sustained or moving forward? So you need to be able to cost to understand what is it costing you to run your programs, whether you can afford to expand it. You need to be able to set aside money in the subject matter we call fund accounting. And after you put in all the hard work, the sad part of it is if you don't have proper controls and have your accounts audited, it can happen, and it has happened, unfortunately, too often, where a knave in your organization quietly squirrel away all the money, all your hard-earned money, your donations gets taken away because of the lack of governance, lack of control, and therefore that's the reason why you need to have an audit to make sure that everything is okay. Now, I've been an auditor for 30 years, starting from the very early days where charities only prepared income expenditure accounts, not even a balance sheet, and then we progress and evolve. And again, audit for charities was just making sure that the statements are prepared to comply, the submission for IRAS, compliance with the basic regulations that are in place and so forth. But times have changed. Today, you are handling more money, there's greater complexity, there's compliance. So you need to invest your efforts into the back room to have the proper accounting system. And this is where just now you heard being mentioned, iShine. There are many services in partnership with the Tote Board that exist to help you to be able to put in place all these mechanisms so you have proper records. But if you can see the interlink, you need to have good accounting systems, you need to have good controls, they're audited, and within it you need to have the ability to work out the cost of your programs so you don't overrun, you don't run faster than you should, and therefore your programs are more sustainable. And these important subjects will all be handled by the speakers in turn, and at the end you have a chance to ask them questions. Now, I just missed one little gap. When you do your fund accounting, I've seen accounts, especially when it comes to sinking funds. So, and this, we're talking about large organizations, they know that their building needs to be repaired in cyclicals of every 5 years. So they say, let's set aside some funds to prepare for it. But they never think about setting aside the money to match it. So when 5 years is up, they have the reserves for the painting, but there's no cash. The money is all, the cash flow is all spent on something else. And so it didn't work. And if you set aside the money, you accumulate your reserve. Simon is going to give you expert advice on how best to get the maximum returns for your reserves. So with that, let's move on to Susan, who is going to cover, Susan is assurance partner. Our old-fashioned term is audit partner. Now we call them assurance partner from Baker Tilly. And you will share with us about fund accounting.
Hi everyone, good morning. I'm Susan. Happy to be here to introduce you to you and share with you the Fund Accounting for Charities booklet. The objective of writing this booklet is actually to provide guidance. Not just guidance, but guidance in an easy to understand manner of what is fund accounting and how to apply fund accounting so it's easier for charities to follow. Let me introduce you to ABC Charity. ABC Charity is a fictional charity with a not so creative name, unfortunately. It's like ABC, right? But if you look at the profile, right, you will see that it's quite similar to some of the charities that we have in Singapore. Why do I introduce you to ABC Charities? Because the booklet starts with the introduction of ABC Charity. In this booklet, we use this charity and we use many examples to try to illustrate how to apply fund accounting. We believe this way you'll be able to relate to it easier and be able to apply fund accounting principles easier. If you look at ABC Charity, they receive donations from different types of income. We have donations from the public, government grants, as well as donations from corporations with restrictions. So we illustrate fund accounting in the booklet by showing you how ABC Charity actually records these different types of donations with different purposes in different pots, or should I say different funds, right? So if you can see from ABC Charity and then you can relate it back to your own charity. The booklet explains why charities should adopt fund accounting in your preparation of financial reporting. We demonstrate in the booklet how fund accounting can help charities present quality financial reporting information, particularly how fund accounting can effectively help charities present an account of how and where you have spent or utilized your resources to your stakeholders. It enables charities to monitor restricted donations very effectively, as well as, like Dr. Yi mentioned, it also allows the charity board to monitor all your internally earmarked assets that you wanted to set aside for certain purposes. Being a fund accounting booklet, of course, we have a chapter dedicated to explain, to provide guidance on the different funds, different categories of funds that a charity would hold. Right? With this explanation, I hope that charities will be able to refer to the guidance and then identify and classify your own funds appropriately. Of course, we provide guidance on how do you do fund transfers, how do you record restricted funds. What else can you find in the booklet? We included illustrations and illustration explanations of what information you should be presented or disclosed in the financial statements. In fact, we have 2 sets of illustrations. One set for charities that are on the SFRS framework, and one set for those on CAS. So I think either charities will find it helpful. We also share practical accounting issues that charities might face if you're using applying fund accounting. FAQ on good practices, you may wish to turn to that chapter because there are some recommendations of good practices that you may wish to adopt. And I think you will find there are box stories included in the booklet where real charities of different sizes share their experiences in applying fund accounting and the benefits they derive from there. I'm sure you will find their experiences very helpful. We set out to ensure the booklet is written in a very clear manner, very clear and straightforward manner, and in a language that actually non-accountants could follow. So as a contributor to this and author of this booklet, I hope more charities, with this guidance, more charities will be encouraged to adopt fund accounting in your financial reporting. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Later on, you'll have a chance to pose other questions to Susan. Let's move to E-Sah. As I mentioned already, E-Sah is the industry leader with RSM for MPO, non-profit organization practice, and the healthcare sector. And we already mentioned you do all this hard work, and you want to have to ensure that your accounts are, the controls are in place, your accounts are best presented, and you really need to have an audit. So E-Sah will talk to you a little bit about that.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Yi. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very honored to be able to contribute to this journey. This book, Cost-Effective Audit for Charities, actually aims to help charities to understand a bit more on the cost component of the external audit, and hopefully certain measures they can adopt to actually improve the cost cost effectiveness during the process. So the book actually started with the why. So why do we need an external audit? Okay, number 1 would be statutory requirement. All charities, all of you are actually governed by your governing instrument as well as your Charities Act. So whether it needs to be audited really depends on which governing instrument you are in, or rather you are IPCs or charities. So if you are IPCs, regardless of your legal constitution, you need to be audited based on the Charities Act. But if you are charities without an IPC status, but yet constituted as companies limited by guarantee, you need to be audited as well. So what happened to the rest? If you are charities, not an IPC, not a CLG, you are a trust, you consider as a trust or funds, you will need to rely on this threshold, which is from the Charities Act. Okay? So I guess charities, you just need to be mindful that if you don't meet the audit threshold by this Charities Act, you will still need to basically comply with your governing instrument. Basically, will be the straighter of the two. Okay. The next one would be the next why would be is a safeguard to minimize audit risk. So as part of the audit process, we may issue maybe certain control lapses point, or maybe points for improvement. So and mitigating certain procedures to mitigate loss. The next one would be ensure accountability to your stakeholders. So an independent review of the financial statements definitely actually enhance certain credibility to your financial records. And of course, in turn, you will promote certain confidence among your stakeholders. So after the why is established, after the need is established, we talk about what. So what are the deliverables? In the booklet, we actually have this table whereby the typical deliverables would be audit plan to the AC, report to the AC, our audit opinion on the financial statements, and lastly, management letter point. Okay, the next few chapters of the book actually discuss on the factors of an audit. So first would be the audit firm that you select. So do not select an audit firm based on just the audit fee. You need to look for a firm whereby they have the relevant experience in auditing charities, know the issues that's faced by charities. Number two, I put in the choice of financial year end. I guess most of the audit firms, we usually do charge a more competitive price if it's actually done during our off-peak period when there's no deadlines. So if you have, say, financial year end December, you wanted the audit to be done maybe in February, sign off in March, it is really inevitable that we will have to charge a premium. So, maybe you can critically, examine whether December year end is really, whether it's really a need to have a December financial year end. Okay. The next factor would be the time spent on audit. The audit fee is actually based on time cost. So how do we ensure that the auditors spend their time efficiently or rather effectively? Okay. So it really depends on the culture of the charity. So the tone from the top is important. It will actually enhance to build, control. A positive tone from the top will actually build control consciousness. The next point would be the board and the AC. So they must also have, to ensure that the internal controls effectiveness are in place. The book actually provides certain guidelines as well on the operational, certain procedures, or rather on the operational controls as well as budget planning and monitoring. So, there's certain procedures, and these are also actually reflected by the Code of Governance as well. The book actually provides certain guidelines in terms of what needs to be documented, in terms of the fundraising activities, the funds and reserve management, conflict of interest, as well as related party transactions. So last but not least, the book talks about how. So how can charities prepare for an audit? So how can charities prepare for an audit? There is some standard accounting records that is typically required by the auditors. So we have provided this in the book, and we also concluded the book with a case study with illustrative examples to enhance the user's understanding. So hopefully this book will add as is useful for all of you in terms of when you engage in your external audits.
Thank you. Just to expand, E-Sah mentioned about having to charge a premium if your year end is December. As you know, audit firms, most of their clients are in the commercial sector, and more than 3/4 of companies have their year end in December, and they all have to be audited within the first quarter or at least the first half of the year. So auditors are very busy during that period. Any of you have a relative, a brother, sister, or children, or auntie, uncle who is in the audit field, you know the saying, there's no life in the first quarter of the year. They don't see sunlight. They are really working flat out. So if you insist on having an audit during that period, the first quarter, they just have no choice but to charge you a premium. Secondly, I think you may not understand, but the audit of a charity is classified as public interest entity. So the audit of a charity is subject to inspection by ACRA. So they have inspectors that goes around to the audit firm and select audit files at random, the audit of charity, to make sure it complies with the international auditing standards. And just to comply with that, just the preparation work to do an audit itself minimally, in terms of actual time cost, will add up to about 2,000, 3,000 easily. So please don't expect like 20 years ago an audit of $1,000. What I want to say is really pay a fair fee and show the auditors how worthy a charity you are. And if the auditors in auditing your charity understands your work and is touched by it, they'll be quite inclined to donate some of it back. And don't deprive of them in getting a 1.5 times tax deduction. Don't get deduct it for them front end and lose out on it. So I think be realistic. Choose a different year end to reduce the cost, and really it's better you pay the auditors a fair fee and then hope they'll donate some back to you. And I think that builds up a very good relationship. Well, later on you have a chance to ask any pressing questions of E-Sah. So having got everything in order, you have your fund. Now, what sort of reserves should you be keeping? And if there's a bit more time, Simon can even give you a hint on what to do with your reserves. He's the Deputy President of CFA Society Singapore, members of which we all go to and ask, what do I do with our money? And then they make sure that we have enough to live in our retirement years. So over to you, Simon.
Thank you, Dr. E. Yes, I'm Simon. I'm part of CFA Society Singapore. The society is very honored and privileged to be part of this journey, as well as contributing towards the sponsorship in this book launch. Myself, I'm very humbled to be part of this contribution towards the booklet as well. So we touch on CFA. I'm not sure if everybody knows what a CFA represents. It's sort of about this 3-letter word. It stands for the Chartered Financial Analyst. CFA Society Singapore is a Singapore chapter of the CFA Institute that's based out from Charlottesville in the United States of America. Our mission is to lead the investment profession by inspiring the profession with the highest standard of ethics, education, professional excellence, knowledge for the ultimate benefit of the society. So how do we sort of connect with the non-profit organization, the charities? I will touch a little bit on that at the later part of the materials. But today, I may disappoint you if you're looking for some tips of which asset class or which particular stocks or bonds you're going to buy, because that's not going to be part of this context, unfortunately. But however, we would be here to share in terms of the governance, the know-how in terms of the how, the why, and the what in terms of reserves and investment management. I think some of the speaker has alluded earlier in the presentation, Dr. Ang, even the minister, we need funding, we need resources to maintain the activities that the charities are doing. I think Dr. E has also alluded earlier, fundraising, donors, the contributions may be volatile. It may not be a constant flow as what we hope to be. So without the constant donors, constant contribution, how are we going to ensure a sustainable activities or sustainable maintenance of the work that the charities is doing to provide to the less fortunate? So that's where the reserves management and investment management comes in. Oh, thank you. Sorry, I thought I have a secretary to help me do this. So, what are elements of reserves management? Why is it important? And how are we going to go about doing it? So, of course, with the donors, with the fundraising, you put aside a pot, or rather you segregate in terms of the contribution into reserves, into restricted, endowment, unrestricted. What is the proportion that you should be allocating to each of this? What is the maintenance that you need to have in order to sustain your operating expenses? I think, the rule of thumb, and I think if you have gone through the code of governance, the ideal maintenance of this ratio of the reserves to the total annual gross expenditure is sort of revolves around 1.5 to 2. I think a survey was carried out. You probably can you have seen in the handbook is the average charities that we have seen maintain around 1.2 to 1.8. So I think all this depends on what you are envisioning the amount that you need to set aside for restricted, for example. Because these are committed. You need to make sure that you're going to deliver. What's left would be the unrestricted. How much of it do you need to maintain an ongoing concern? Whether is it in terms of the utilities, the rental, or any form of operating expenses that you need to incur. With that, then it's going to boil down to an amount where you believe you can set aside to generate future income. And what is the purpose of this? Today, we are seeing the Singapore core inflation at around 1.9% based on December 2018 on a year-to-year basis. You need to sustain that, right? You need to sustain the inflation. You need to make sure that you're able to afford the daily expenses. So, in the past, many charities, without a good knowledge, they will say, all right, how about we put into a fixed deposit? And that has been the results or the verdict when we conduct surveys, when we conduct seminars with charities, where is the majority of the funds are being channeled? Fixed deposit. Today, ask yourself, how much is fixed deposit delivering to you? If you put into a 1 month, 3 months, 6 months fixed deposit, it's hardly near 1%. Longer term, it's not able to meet up your inflation rate or the rise of inflation. So would that be the most meaningful asset class, or will you be able to sustain the activities by putting all the investable reserves in fixed deposit? I think the answer is pretty clear. So that leads down to the management of the resources. How much are you going to spend? How much are you going to save or retain? And with the spending, how much of it is going to go into income-generating activities? How much of it is to sustain your existing activities, which is operating? Activities for your future costs, for your further advancement in terms of the further goods that you would like to do. So I think it's a very tricky aspect in terms of how much you're going to retain, how much you're going to set aside. But I think again it boils down to you need to come up with a plan. You need to come up with a plan in terms of your budgeting. How much of it you believe you're going to incur, how much of it you're going to set aside, how much of it is for raining days, how much of it you can sort of lock in for a longer term of commitment. So with that sort of plan, you will be able to have a better idea the allocation that you can put into some meaningful form of investment activities. The code of the governance has done a great job. They have set out the elements of reserve policy. By the way, the booklet that you'll be seeing under Reserves of Investment Management anchors around reserves, investment, reserve policy, investment policy. They are two separate things. All right? And I think for this code of governance, they have set out a very good idea or in terms of the tools and sort of a sample how you can prepare a reserves management policy. The elements that are required in the reserves management policy, what do you need to ascertain? And in fact, they have a template. This is the template that you will be seeing in the code of governance. And to lay out the elements, okay, number one, what do you need to do? Reserves allocation, restricted, endowment, unrestricted. Second, what would be the amount, the percentage in terms of the ratio to your total gross annual expenditure. And then ends off with, what you need to do, who is going to monitor it, who is going to maintain it. So all these elements is a governance. It becomes a governance issue of how to be productive, as Dr. Ang has alluded earlier, to make it to. So with that, you will be able to abide by it. So often, charities, they are nervous. Why they are nervous? Because there isn't a policy that help them and walk them through the process. It's random. To decide, okay, today I'm going to do this, tomorrow I'm going to do that, for future costs. But once you're able to lay out a plan, you live by the plan, that will give you the confidence that you're able to meet your obligation. And I think that is critical because that instills the discipline, whether is it to the management or even to the board, to fulfill to fulfill the plan, to go with the plan, and so that you'll be able to fulfill the obligation. So, what are the improvements that can be done? As I mentioned earlier, the fear comes with the lack of knowledge. And henceforth, that's where we felt CFA Society Singapore is able to step in terms of educating, providing the financial literacy to the community or to the charities. And I think since about 5-6 years ago, we started to work, in fact, probably longer than that, but myself, I started to work with CMPR, part of NVPC, in engaging with NPOs, charities, to provide that financial literacy to the community. And I think that is important because with the knowledge, like what Dr. Ang has mentioned, we want to do it, but we do not know how. So once you know the know-how, you have the confidence, you're able to live with it, you set up the plan, you walk through the plan, and that will tie you through, that instills the discipline to tie you through amid crises, amid volatility. Go back 10 years ago, between 2008 and 2010, or maybe 2007 and 2009, Lehman crisis, subprime crisis, followed on by global financial crisis. A lot of charities were hit. I think in the case study, one of the charities reported 2008, they were down 9.7% in 1 year. Are you able to live through that volatility? How are you going to live through it? That's discipline. You lay out a plan, you set up a plan. You have this fund that's been allocated for investment management, for investment specific purposes. And hence, you know that you're able to stomach that volatility because you have prepared for it, and you are able to continue your operating, you're able to continue your operations with that funds that has been set aside to meet your operating, to meet your daily operations. So I think, as I mentioned, the handbook anchors on the reserve policy, the investment policy as well. I think this, especially investment policy, will help you, will help the board, will help the management to have a clear idea on what objectives to meet, the risks that you will be taking, which expertise you need to engage, what you need to do, how to meet through the crises, and how to conduct an evaluation. With the evaluation, you will be well aware of what has been going on and to prepare for the next leg. So I think with that, thank you.
Thank you, Simon. I think practically all the charities here depends on fixed deposits, and Simon has quite rightly pointed out that the returns on fixed deposit is not enough to cover inflation. And I think you're all eager to read the book to get some information. What else can you do? But just quickly, in 2 minutes, can you just give us a quick education? Obviously, if it's not fixed deposit, it's going to be fixed income, buying a bond. How critical is it to only focus on rated bonds, and what's the difference between A, B, B plus, A plus, minus, and is the risk that much difference, you know? Where is the lowest cutoff point that a charity should even consider? 2 minutes.
Okay, I think at the end of the day, that's the reason why the investment policy is very important. The investment policy will help you to set up the appetite, the risk appetite of each of the various organizations or charities. And it's not only bonds, it's even beyond bonds. You talk about equities, you talk about REITs, you talk about ETFs, just a few examples. Of course, I believe there are not many charities who can participate in some private instruments or alternatives, structured products for the matter. So recently, when we have an engagement of conversation, we are very surprised to hear that many charities do not even know what REITs are. What does REITs represent? What does ETFs represent? So I think that there really isn't a sort of a golden rule to say that, okay, triple B would be the minimum. I think it's on the risk appetite. Of course, Singapore government securities, Singapore government bonds, AAA rating, some of the government bonds, AA rating, statutory bonds, AA rating. These are sort of what we call the safety assets. They earn a little bit more than fixed income. They provide you with a little bit of safety net, if you will, compared to equities, compared to other forms of non-fixed income instruments. But I think you got to understand, that everything that comes with risk reward. You're bearing this amount of risk, you get this kind of rewards, and if you need to meet a certain objectives in terms of the return, you have to know that are you able to tolerate this amount of risk in order to fulfill that. If you can't, you need to bring down your investment objectives. You need to bring down to realistic level that this is only the return that you can achieve putting the various asset class together. Of course, the other part will be asset allocation. How much of it is going to go to bonds? How much of it is going to equities? And so on and so forth. So I think the golden rule is the board, with the help of potentially external investment professional or external experienced professional, to lay down that policy to know your risk appetite that the return can match up to, or the return that the risk appetite can match up to.
Thank you, Simon. I think for those of you who are blessed with large enough reserves that needs to have an investment committee, so take note, make sure you have a board member with a CFA qualification. So over to you, Shiu, something that is close to my heart, cost accounting that starts everything, because most of you need subvention. And if you don't have accurate cost accounting, how do you convince the government to pay you more money per capita? Over to you, Shiu.
So I received a moment of enlightenment during the first panel, because my topic is why we must do full cost accounting, right? So I didn't need to do all these slides, because the answer was given by the Commissioner of Charities. Because you can do, but you cannot hide. So we have to do full cost accounting. Okay. So as a charity, we are actually set up to meet needs which are not provided for in the mainstream, including many other needs like doing clicker jobs at the panel. And the cost of doing this is, okay, I won't go through what's up there, but this part here, there are many cost considerations when running a charity, so I'll go right into it, the nuts and bolts as to what it means for an Assisi Hospice, which is very different from the other presentations. Because at Assisi Hospice, my manpower cost is 73%. And if this is 73%, I certainly do not look at it in terms of FTE. The cost component of my manpower, I look at it in 4 different aspects. The first one is my service level. So what's the staffing ratio that I need, and the types of professionals that I need, and this will factor into my cost. The second part, the level of clinical care which I provide, and what are the benchmarks I use. The higher the level of benchmark, the higher the cost is to me. I also look at the experience and expertise of my staff. Do I need to hire junior staff? Do they all need to be senior staff? And these are very important considerations which feed into my cost. And finally, and very importantly, the size and the structure of my leadership team. How do I cost in terms of manpower so that I can achieve strategic growth, so that I have a team that's innovative, and I can achieve all that I want to do. And all these are very important cost considerations, and it truly fits into what I look at when we do full cost accounting at Assisi. And then the next thing is I've got all my indirect costs, right? I'm a palliative care facility, so the ambience of my facility is important. How much do I pay for aesthetics and comfort for my patients? And also there is the goodness of the facility, so how much am I willing to pay for the housekeeping, the facility management? And given that I have a new facility and needs to last 30 years, what do I need to do? Then finally, I have other costs, which are my direct costs, which has got to do with food and beverage and the medications and consumables that I use. So how much should I provide for in terms of the goodness in taste and quality of the food for my patients? And knowing every single element of this and how it all adds up to the cost of what we do for our patients is absolutely critical. So we use the costing model framework, which has been given to us by MOH, fortunately for us. MOH is a very good sector administrator, so I'm doing my PR part here. So in 2015, they introduced this framework to be used by the community hospitals and the hospices, and this allowed us to cost. So every single dollar that we use is costed into a service that we provide. I have 3 services, and at any point in time, my finance manager will know this, and I ask on a regular basis, how much does it cost me in total to provide 1 patient day? How much does it cost me to provide 1 month of home care for a patient? And how much does it cost me to provide 1 day of my day patient's attendance at my daycare center? And by knowing all of this, it really helps me to decide how I want to grow each service and what more resources I need to add in or reduce so that I can continue to add value to my clients, which are my patients and my family members. So, cost accounting or full cost accounting is completely important because I need to do full cost recovery as well. So, I've got 2 examples up there. The first example is my home care service. My home care service, I discover that the funding level for that is quite similar to the MOH funding level. So I say, woohoo, thank you very much, MOH. MOH, just remember to give me incremental amounts of funding every year. However, there's a story behind this. When my service was very much smaller, it cost me way above the MOH funding level. So I was very, very stressed when I decided that we wanted to grow the service by 2 to 3 times. But after growing the service 2 to 3 times and applying all those principles of manpower management, which I shared before, we discovered that we have economies of scale, and now my funding level, or rather my cost level, is the same as the MOH funding level, so pretty happy with that. Okay, then I come to my inpatient example. I discover that on a per patient day basis, the MOH funding just covers a little bit over 50% of what I actually need. So that's the part where the accountability comes in, right? I get a bit concerned. Am I over-providing? But no, then we use international benchmarks of standards of care. We use the appropriate staffing ratios, and then we decide that we have a reasonable expression of the value that I need to deliver. And so my costing is right. It's just the MOH just needs to increase the funding a little bit more. And so then that's my advocacy to MOH. Please take a look. These are all my cost components. I'm perfectly transparent. Can you try to fund us in a more equitable way? I'm going to skip this one and go right to the last part. So, okay. So essentially, at Assisi, I feel we have a pretty good organizational culture of transparency, good governance, as well as accountability to our stakeholders. And it's only because as a board and as a management we believe in this, then actually practicing full cost accounting is a natural expression and the result of these values that we have as an organization. And most importantly, the ability to do full cost accounting also allows us to do full cost recovery. And if we are in here for the long run and we want to be sustainable in all that we do, then truly being able to recover all our costs from the strategic work to the groundwork is absolutely important. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the floor? Yes. Usha. You're going to tell us all how to raise more money.
I have one point and one question. One point was basically about cost accounting. Very often when I do the fundraising work, I realize that the fundraising department does not even know what the real cost of operations is. And they set targets like 10% more than last year, or something very sad, actually. And because of that, just like Shiu mentioned, she advocates with MOH on how to get more. The same advocacy can happen to the philanthropists and the donors, that this is what it takes to make the change and for us to thrive. And this is what. So the importance of fundraising and finance working together, and the CEO and the leadership being part of it. That's my point. And my question, following up on Simon, is whilst we have so many organizations with 2 years, 5 years, 10 years reserve, is there an aggregation we could do since we're talking about the future? Singapore is sort of the financial hub. The rest of Asia comes here to manage money. Why are we keeping our individual reserves and figuring out, how to do vanilla deposits when we could aggregate some of the bigger ones? Since we have IPCs, and we know exactly who the more than 10 million are and so on and so forth. Why aren't we doing that?
I think good question. Yes, I was just double checking that Gigi is still here for NCSS. So, being the umbrella organization for the social service sector, maybe you should take note and encourage some of your members at least to get started. Certainly in the healthcare, among the hospitals and all that, that's already being practiced. It's all aggregated. And to get leverage in terms of the investment returns. And yeah, you're right. I mean, it can't. But and if it ever happens, I think the rest of it will take care of itself. It means the trust amount SSAs has reached a certain level where we all know how to collaborate. And ultimately, that is what we should be aiming for. It takes much more trust to leave your money all to one. And, the difficulty, even, having been involved in healthcare, on our own, confidently, I can tell you, I don't need this much of money for the next 5 years. But the moment I have to hand it to someone to manage for me, then I begin to feel maybe I might need some of it within 3 years. Maybe I need some within 1 year. That sort of things is part of the normal process. But good idea. So I think Gigi will lead the way. Anyone else? Yes.
I think I have two questions. One is for Susan. When you're talking about cost accounting for, fund accounting for charities, are you alluding that SSA should adopt the charity form of accounting? Or are you saying that within the context of IFRS, you also could practice the fund accounting? Then second question is to Simon. About investments. I happen to sit in the risk committee of one of the charitable organizations. And the conversation goes this way. Okay, if we got to think about what sort of risk appetite and all that, and if we happen to lose money, what would my donors say about me? I'd rather not be in positions that I have to be answerable for loss of money to investment, because as you mentioned, there's always risk and returns. I rather that if I need more money, I do a good job, I go and ask my donors for support again. So I'd like your views on that.
Thanks for the question. I think it's a very good question. For charities that are already on Charities Accounting Standard, which is CS, basically CS is written on the basis of fund accounting principles. So naturally, these charities are already adopting fund accounting. This booklet explains fund accounting that even so that even charities that are on the SFRS framework can adopt. You can adopt fund accounting and also comply with SFRS. So we provide guidance on that as well as illustrations how you can then also present information about your funds yet comply with the SFRS framework. Yeah.
I'll just quickly add on, being one of the people behind the Charities Accounting Standards when it first came out, I will confess is outdated and we really need to put some effort into updating it. Because even the IFRS have changed, and the Charities Accounting Standard is based on a subset of that, so it cannot remain as it is. But even it is in its current form, there are several of these things that has made life very convenient, like the accounting for the funds. So akan datang. Yeah. Simon.
Thank you for the question. In fact, this question often came out with our conversation or seminars when we hold together with charities. I break it down in two parts. First part, I would say literacy. I think often charities or even boards, management of charities, they are lack of financial literacy. So their perception of investment is you could lose money. True, not all investments are extremely safe investment. Having said that, not all investment are bad investments. The ability to set up the reserves management and the policies, investment policies, is important because the policy will govern what is the threshold. Is there any cut loss rule that you put in place? Assuming the charities or even the board believes that they are not able to take a loss of more than 5% over a certain period. When that is triggered, you exercise that rule to cut off the investment. So you know in advance what is the element of loss you could stomach. But I think in terms of financial literacy, there are also areas where I believe some boards may not, management may not be aware. For example, Singapore government securities, which could earn more than a fixed deposit, and they are a government bonds. They are Singapore government bonds. There is a very high level of protection. Now, I can't put my head on the chopping board to say that it won't default, but that is a trust. If you trust Singapore government, you know that I think that is a very highly rated instrument, if you will. There are also instruments that are less risky. Again, I mentioned earlier, through the conversation we have with charities, it's unlikely that charities will go to the extent of participating in structured products, alternatives that they consider high-risk asset classes or high-risk instruments. If the board or even management can be educated about the risk of, say, for example, REITs is a yearly income instrument, all right? And that, yes, although it has the amount of risk that equity asset class, but they're somehow like a hybrid between bonds and equity because they delivers yield. The board may be tolerable about it if they are being educated on it. So I think rule is financial literacy. Second, have a good policy, have a policy in place that the board that is transparent and is being conveyed to the donors, conveyed to the stakeholders that this is the amount of risk that they may occur, but we will have a rule that when that triggers, the risk being cut. So they are being informed of the risk that could potentially be incurred. So I think with that, it might be palatable to the board and the management. So I believe a certain level of education has to be delivered. I mean, we can't just say that, okay, this is investment, all right? Yeah, we may lose everything tomorrow. I mean, I think that's not the right education that we should be delivering to the management of charities and the board.
I think up to 15, 18 years ago, I used to sing that song. I used to tell everyone, don't bother. I mean, nobody's going to thank you for earning extra $1, but you're going to have a big rock thrown at you for losing $1. You know, so put fixed deposit safest. But, but over the years, my attitude has changed because the expectations of donors have changed. Today, when the donors look at financial, they say, you got so much cash, you left it in the bank and you're not getting returns from it, you will be criticized. So the only way is to have sound investment policy that spells out the conditions, your risks and everything. And there are these blue chip fixed income bonds, 3 years bonds, and unless the company goes belly up, doesn't matter the value goes down, just collect your coupons and in 3 years' time you get back your capital, so it's very safe. So I've stopped singing that song. Yeah. So I'm very familiar what you just said. Yeah, I used to be one of those. What's left to be said is 2 years of hard work has gone into producing these materials. Please do download it, or you have hard copy, go through it. It's written in layman's language. So all that's left is you can join me to thank our panelists and contributors to the book. Thank you very much.
Thank you, our panelists. Please join me to thank them once again for their sharing.